Chevron 1 encoded, Chevron 2 encoded, and so on incrementally up to the 7th chevron, which is a little different because that's when the wormhole connects. When that happens, I like to change things up a little bit and just say Chevron 7 locked.
You have to show up in 2 episodes. In other words, you were in an episode and then you recurred in another episode. Most people think about recurring characters as people who are sort of ongoing, not in every episode necessarily, but sort of ongoing as a recurring character. And I didn't think anything of it. I just went in and did my regular audition with no idea that it would turn into a 10-year gig. I had no clue. And also just every actor is told to, when you go to an audition, you got to kind of bring something to the audition, something of yourself. And because I didn't really know, they hadn't made the show yet. So it's not like you're already auditioning for an established show where you kind of know what the tone is. And you go, okay, I can adjust my audition tone for that particular show. Like X-Files, everything is like super deadpan and, like really low key delivery. And because that show was already up and running. But Stargate hadn't started yet. And so I didn't know what the kind of tone was. And the only thing I could bring to the audition was comedy, because that's all I knew. And so my audition comprised of me just saying Chevron 1 encoded, Chevron 2 encoded, Chevron 3, with little breaks to other action scenes. And I kept, every time it came back to me, I would be like, Chevron 4 encoded, making it sound like I was almost annoyed that I was having to open up these chevrons. And then by the time it got to Chevron 7, I was like full on Jerry Lewis, like Chevron 7 locked. And I look over and Brad Wright and all those guys, they're just killing themselves laughing. And I thought, oh, this is going well. But I had no idea that that wasn't the tone, I was just like over the top comedy. But I found out later on when I spoke with Brad, he said, the reason why we hired you or brought you back and hired you was because you were the only actor who did anything with the words. Okay. Everybody else just read them as like dead seriously and, kind of had no personality to them. And I just, it's not that it's not that I have more personality than any other actors, because there's so many great actors in Vancouver. It's just that it's almost like a fluke. I only brought the one thing that I knew. And I thought, well, if this doesn't work, who knows? And I got called back and I got the part. And then I was the technician for 10 years.
And I suppose, Gary, when you got the part of our original members of the show already cast, were you sort of aware who was going to be on the show? Did your agent tell you some of the cast members, or was
they never tell you anything like that. I mean, the one thing they would say is like, oh, this is the lead actor is Richard Dean Anderson. They would just say that, it's Richard Dean Anderson is playing the Kurt Russell, reprising the Kurt Russell part, and he's Jack O'Neill, and everybody else is like, who knows who they are? People, that's almost like a myth, or people just don't do that. Who the lead, who the main person is, and but beyond that, like I auditioned for Fargo here, the TV show, a while back, like a couple of years ago, and they didn't say, oh, this is a scene with Martin Freeman, or Billy Bob Thornton. They just don't tell you that. They just say, you're just auditioning for this part and go in and read for this part. And then I didn't get the part, but then I saw it later and I was like, oh, that was the scene with Martin Freeman. You just find out later.
And I suppose, Gary, in terms of your on-screen relationship with Don, who played General Hammond, there was a sort of take, in every sort of take, you were always together. in terms of, you just look up at that sort of room when SG1 were embarking, and they'd see you, Walter, your character, and you'd see General Hammond, just essence of, you're always in that sort of shot together. And what was it sort of working with Don, because you were probably in every sort of take together. He looked a very sort of serious character, his character General Hammond, but people say he was a very relaxed, chilled, mellow type of individual.
He was just, yeah, he looked pissed off in all his scenes. He was always like, kind of like, you know, almost like ready to blow. But off camera, he was just a complete sweetheart, great guy. You know, an interesting thing about Dawn was a friend of mine who is an actor here in Vancouver. She studied acting at the University of British Columbia, and she told me one day that Dawn used to be like the theater carpenter, like at the University of British Columbia in the theater department. Dawn was the carpenter, right? No acting experience, but he had that, you know, he had a great look, and he had that southern, you know, Missouri, you know, I'm from Missouri, you know, drawl, you know, that he never lost. He had a great voice and everything. So we were laughing because she was saying, you know, they're all there working their asses off, trying to be actors and doing plays and trying to get, you know, hoping to get out there in the world and get work. And Don would show up and he'd go, "Oh, hi kids. Well, I just got asked to be in a commercial." And they're like, "What?" And you're like, "Do you have any acting experience?" He's like, "No, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing this." And then he'd land a commercial. They're like, "Wow, that's great, Don," like sort of patronizing him, thinking, "Oh, that's like a little one-off for the set carpenter." Then he comes in at one point, he goes, "Well, guess what? I just got cast in some show." And they're like, "What? You got cast in a show?" He goes, "Yeah, it's called Twin Peaks, directed by David Lynch." And they're like, "Are you kidding me? You got cast in Twin Peaks?" He's like, "Oh." Look, so Don would like kind of like be like, "I don't know what's going on." And then he got cast in Stargate, and he sort of fell into it, but he was just the loveliest guy to work with. When I first met Don, he was a barrel-chested, super strong guy. He would get up in the morning and he would do 500 push-ups. Wow. He had arms, like his arms were gigantic. And he said he would do 500 push-ups, and I'd say to him, "Well, you might want to try sit-ups too, because that belly is not going anywhere." And so we had that kind of relationship. Yeah. He would always say, you know, "Are you in the next script? Because if you're in the next script, that probably means I'm in the next script." And Don and I would joke around that a lot. And he shook my hand when I first met him, and he said, "Hi, I'm Don S. Davis. I'm 235 pounds of romping, stomping Missouri bullshit." That was his introduction to me. And I was like, okay, this is the way it's going to go. But he was like strong, barrel-chested, the loveliest guy.